If I had scraped the ice that night, like my husband demanded, I would not be alive to tell this story. At the time, nothing about that day felt important enough to change my life. It was late afternoon in Detroit, the kind of winter day where the sky never fully brightens, and the cold seems to seep straight into your bones. The wind pushed hard against the glass doors of the small neighborhood grocery store on Gratiot Avenue, rattling them every time someone came in or out. Snow had already turned to ice on the sidewalks, and people moved quickly, heads down, eager to get home. I was standing in line with a handbasket resting against my knee, my shoulders aching from a long shift at the clinic. I worked as a medical billing clerk. Nothing glamorous, just hours of codes and corrections, insurance calls, and quiet frustration. At 57, life had settled into a narrow routine. Work, home, dinner, silence. I no longer expected surprises. Ahead of me at the register stood a very small elderly woman, hunched as if the weight of the winter pressed directly on her back. She wore a thin brown coat that had clearly seen many winters before this one, and a knitted hat pulled down low over wisps of white hair. Her hands shook as she emptied the contents of a cracked vinyl wallet onto the counter. Loose coins scattered across the surface. Pennies, nickels, a few dimes. On the conveyor belt lay only the basics: a loaf of store-brand bread, a carton of milk, 2 cans of soup, 1 small bag of rice. The cashier glanced at the screen, then at the woman. I recognized that look, tired but careful. "You're short $1.18, she said gently. The woman frowned, confusion washing over her face. She gathered the coins again, counted them once, then twice, lips moving silently. "That can't be right," she whispered. "I counted at home. I was sure I had enough." Someone behind me sighed loudly. Another shifted impatiently. I don't know why, but something tightened in my chest. Maybe it was the way the woman's fingers trembled from the cold. Maybe it was how familiar that look of quiet embarrassment felt. I had worn it myself more times than I cared to remember. Before I could overthink it, I stepped forward. "I've got it," I said, placing a 20 on the counter. "Please just add it to mine." The woman turned slowly, eyes lifting to meet mine. For a moment, I forgot the noise of the store, the wind, the line behind us. Her eyes were sharp, clear, far too alert for someone who looked so fragile. It felt as if she were looking through me rather than at me. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "I know," I replied, "but I want to." She nodded once, then gathered her groceries into a worn cloth bag. When she took the bag from the counter, her hand brushed mine. Her skin was cold, too cold. "Kindness doesn't disappear," she said quietly. "It circles back." I smiled politely, paid for my own groceries, and turned to leave. I was already halfway toward the door when I felt her fingers close around my sleeve. Not weak, firm. She leaned in close enough that I could smell something earthy and sharp, like dried herbs and old paper. "When the ice appears outside your house tonight," she whispered, her voice low and steady, "do not touch it, not even a little." I stared at her, confused. "Leave it exactly as it is," she continued. "Promise me." I laughed softly, awkwardly, unsure what else to do. "Okay," I said, more out of discomfort than belief. "I promise." Only then did she let go. By the time I pushed through the glass doors into the bitter Detroit wind, she was already gone. By the time I reached my car, the wind had sharpened into something almost personal. Ice coated the windshield in uneven patches, and my breath fogged the glass as I sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, replaying the woman's words in my head. "Do not touch the ice." I shook my head and turned the key. People said strange things all the time, especially people who had lived long enough to see patterns where others saw coincidence. I told myself that was all it was. A harmless warning. A superstition. The drive home took less than 10 minutes, but the streets were already slick. The city muted under a thin, dangerous glaze. Detroit winters had a way of making everything feel heavier. Buildings, thoughts, marriages. Our house sat on a quiet block on the east side. A narrow brick place with a shallow front yard and a chain-link fence that had seen better days. The porch light was on, casting a pale yellow circle over the front steps. Ice glistened on the walkway, smooth and glassy. Richard's car was already in the driveway. I carried the groceries inside, my shoulders tense before I even opened the door. The house smelled faintly of coffee and motor oil, the familiar mix that clung to Richard no matter how many times I washed his clothes. He was in the kitchen, standing at the counter, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when I came in. "You're late," he said. "There was ice everywhere," I replied, setting the bags down. Traffic was slow. He hummed in response, a sound that wasn't agreement or disagreement, just noise filling space. Richard Carter had perfected that sound over the years. He was 60 now, tall and still broad-shouldered, though his hair had thinned and gone gray at the temples. He worked as a logistics supervisor at a distribution warehouse near the river. Long hours. Constant stress. Or at least, that was what he said. I unpacked the groceries while he watched his screen. Bread in the cabinet. Milk in the fridge. The simple rhythm of it steadied me. "I'm heading out tonight," he said suddenly. I paused. "Tonight?" "Yeah, overnight run issue. They need me on site early tomorrow." He finally looked up at me then, his eyes flat. "Make sure you scrape the ice before you go to bed. I don't want to deal with that mess in the morning." There it was, the instruction. Not a request, never a question. My first instinct was to nod, to agree automatically the way I had for decades. That was how our marriage worked now. He spoke, I adjusted. But the words from the grocery store rose up, uninvited and sharp. "When the ice appears outside your house tonight, do not touch it." "I might wait until morning," I said carefully. "It's supposed to get colder overnight. Scraping now might not help much." Richard's jaw tightened. "I said tonight," he replied. "It'll only take you 15 minutes. You're home anyway." Home anyway. I felt something shift inside me. A small thing. Quiet, but solid. "I've had a long day," I said. "And my knee's been acting up again." He exhaled through his nose, irritated. "You always have something." The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. We had been living inside silences like this for years, stepping around them, pretending they weren't walls. Richard grabbed his jacket and keys. "I'll be gone by 8, he said. "Don't forget." He walked past me without another word, his shoulder brushing mine as he headed for the stairs. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the back door, at the faint reflection of ice shining outside. For the first time in a very long while, I wasn't sure I was going to do what my husband told me to do. Richard left just before 8, the door closing behind him with a dull, final sound that echoed through the house. I watched from the living room window as his car backed out of the driveway, tires crunching over the thin layer of ice I had not touched. His taillights disappeared at the end of the block, swallowed by the gray-blue darkness of early winter evening. The house felt larger the moment he was gone, too quiet. Every sound seemed to stretch. I locked the door, then checked it again, twisting the deadbolt until it clicked firmly into place. I told myself I was being cautious, nothing more. Detroit winters had a way of making people jumpy. Outside, the temperature dropped fast. Ice thickened across the porch steps and along the walkway, turning the ground into a smooth, dangerous sheet that reflected the porch light like dull glass. I stood there for a long moment, coat still on, shovel resting against the wall where Richard had leaned it earlier. All I had to do was pick it up. 15 minutes, he had said. I thought of the old woman's grip on my sleeve, the weight in her voice, not even a little. I turned away and shut the door. Inside, I moved through the house with restless energy. I turned on extra lamps, filling the rooms with warm light that pushed back the shadows. I pulled the curtains closed, one by one, then hesitated at the window facing the backyard. The fence line was barely visible now, the alley beyond it completely swallowed by darkness. The wind picked up, rattling the loose boards on the shed. Somewhere in the distance, metal clanged, sharp and hollow, then went silent again. I told myself it was nothing, a loose gate, a trash can tipping over. I heated soup, but barely tasted it. My appetite had vanished, replaced by a dull pressure in my chest that refused to go away. I checked my phone. No messages. The signal flickered, then dropped to 1 bar. Around 10, the lights dimmed for a split second, then steadied. My heart jumped anyway. I locked the back door, then the bedroom door. I felt foolish doing it, but I did it all the same. When I finally went upstairs, I changed into my night clothes and sat on the edge of the bed, listening. The house creaked as it settled, old wood responding to the cold. Somewhere beneath those familiar sounds, I thought I heard something else. A scrape. I froze. The sound came again. Slow, deliberate. I crossed the room and peered through the narrow gap in the curtain. The yard lay still, coated in ice that glimmered faintly under the moonlight. Nothing moved. I exhaled, my breath fogging the glass. I was letting my imagination run away with me. That was all. Sleep came in fragments. I drifted off only to wake again at the slightest noise. At some point, I dreamed of the woman from the store. She stood at the edge of my yard, her figure blurred by frost, her eyes sharp as ever. "The ice remembers," she said calmly. "People forget, but the ice never does." I woke with a start, my heart pounding, the house silent around me. I checked the clock. Just after 3. For a long time, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for morning to come. Morning came quietly, the way it often does after a storm, as if the night had spent all its violence and left nothing behind but stillness. I woke to a pale gray light pressing against the bedroom curtains and an unfamiliar silence. No wind, no distant traffic, just the slow, steady sound of my own breathing. For a moment, I forgot about the ice, about the warning, about the unease that had followed me through the night. Then I sat up. The house felt too calm, like a held breath. I pulled on a thick sweater and wrapped my robe around myself before heading downstairs. The floor was cold under my feet, the kind of cold that seeps upward, reminding you it is winter whether you like it or not. I made coffee out of habit, the machine gurgling softly in the quiet kitchen. As it brewed, I walked to the front window. I stopped. The yard was covered in a flawless sheet of ice, smooth and unbroken, stretching from the porch steps to the fence line. It caught the weak morning light and reflected it back, silver and glassy, almost beautiful in its stillness. Almost, because cutting through that perfect surface was a trail of footprints. Large ones. They began at the side gate, pressed deep and wide into the ice, each step deliberate and heavy. They moved straight toward the house, stopping just short of the porch. Then they turned. My stomach dropped. The prints circled the house slowly, methodically, tracing the outline of the walls. They paused beneath the living room window, then the kitchen. Then they moved along the side of the house toward the back, where the bedroom windows faced the yard. I pressed my hand to the glass, my fingers trembling. The footprint stopped directly below my bedroom window. I could almost see it, someone standing there in the dark, looking up, watching. The coffee maker beeped behind me, loud in the silence. I flinched hard enough that my shoulder brushed the cabinet. My heart was racing now, pounding so violently I could feel it in my throat. I leaned closer to the